We are learning new details today about the man wanted for questioning in the suspicious death of a Binghamton University student.
The disappearance of a college student in New York triggered an international manhunt to find her killer.
A true crime documentary film recreates the case that shook the peaceful town of Westbury, New York, a story that left the entire nation stunned by how fragile the line between love, trust, and tragedy can be. Haley Anderson was born on May 9, 1995, the youngest of two daughters to Gordon and Karen. She grew up with her older sister, Madeline, in a warm and loving family where everyone took pride in her intelligence and kind heart. As she entered adulthood, Haley moved to the city of Binghamton, roughly 200 miles southeast of the city, known as the City of Scenic Beauty for its classic architecture and serene surroundings. Although it was a small city with fewer than 50,000 residents, Binghamton was renowned for its well-preserved neighborhoods, lush green parks, and vibrant academic atmosphere thanks to Binghamton University, the school where Haley was studying. In March 2018, Haley had just turned 22. She was a senior nursing student who worked part-time at Jazzman's Cafe on campus for over 3 years. Her friends described her as hardworking, warm, and someone who always made others feel heard. Haley loved music, adventure, and firmly believed that with effort, she could make a difference in people's lives, something that explained her passion for nursing. She had already been accepted to work at Northwell Health, one of the largest hospital systems on Long Island, where she would join the emergency department right after her graduation that May. As an independent young woman, Haley was confident and open in her relationships. She often dated and socialized with friends around campus, something completely normal for someone in their 20s. During her final years at Binghamton University, Haley met another nursing student named Orlando Tercero. At first, he seemed friendly, humorous, and easygoing. Orlando held dual citizenship in the United States and Nicaragua and had lived for several years in Miami, often traveling between the two countries. With his calm appearance and outgoing personality, Orlando quickly became familiar within Haley's circle of friends. Some described him as caring and always eager to create a fun atmosphere. Yet beneath that friendliness, something unsettling was slowly emerging, and Haley, with her kind-hearted nature, probably didn't notice the early warning signs. Their relationship started casually, but Haley always kept her boundaries clear. She wasn't ready to commit to anyone and continued maintaining a close friendship with her ex-boyfriend, Kevin. In fact, Haley had met Orlando through Kevin, and she made it clear that she didn't want a serious relationship. However, it seemed Orlando couldn't accept that. His attention gradually turned possessive as he began trying to control who Haley met, where she went, and what she did. Whenever Haley hung out with male friends or spent time with Kevin, Orlando would often become irrationally angry. On one occasion, he showed up at Haley's house unannounced, sitting silently on the porch, smoking, and waiting for her to come home. That was the first sign of obsession, but at the time, Haley believed it was simply an expression of excessive care. She had no idea that these small behaviors would soon escalate into far more troubling actions. On the morning of September 16, 2017, Haley woke up to discover something strange. All 4 of her car tires had been deliberately slashed. The damage totaled over $600, a significant amount for a senior college student. With a strong intuition, Haley believed this wasn't a random act. Just the night before, She had met up with her ex-boyfriend Kevin, and Orlando knew about it. He had previously shown possessive behavior whenever Haley got close to someone else, and this time, his jealousy seemed to have crossed a line. Though confused, Haley tried to stay calm. She documented everything and shared it on Snapchat as a way to keep evidence. Not long after, Orlando responded by claiming that his car had also been damaged in the same way. It was an unbelievable coincidence. But given everything Haley had experienced before, she knew it couldn't simply be chance. When she mentioned that she was planning to report the incident to the police, Orlando immediately discouraged her, saying, "I don't think that's a good idea." Strangely enough, he never reported his own supposed damage either. Haley understood that if she went through with a complaint, Orlando could face expulsion from school, something she, despite being hurt, didn't want to cause. So instead of cutting ties completely, she softened once again. Haley continued to stay in contact, occasionally meeting with Orlando, perhaps because she believed he might change. Their relationship dragged on for more than a year, unofficial yet bound by something difficult to define. To her friends, the situation was clear. Haley wanted to end it, but Orlando never seemed willing to accept that. It was at that point that his controlling behavior began to escalate, and from there, Haley's life entered its most dangerous phase. On the night of March 7th, 2018, the atmosphere inside Haley Anderson's small apartment was filled with laughter and music. She and her close friends were having a simple get-together, opening a bottle of wine, playing a few trivia games, and chatting late into the night. Everyone noticed how cheerful, radiant, and full of energy Haley was. There wasn't the slightest sign of anything being wrong. She had just submitted her final assignment, was about to graduate, and her future seemed brighter than ever. Around 3 a.m. After the gathering ended, Haley told her friends she was going out for a bit to meet up with an old friend, Orlando Tercero, the guy she had dated during nursing school. To Haley's close friends, it wasn't unusual for her to see Orlando, since even though their relationship had ended, the two still kept in touch from time to time. However, just 2 days later, on March 9th, 2018, a horrifying discovery shook the entire Binghamton University campus and left the small city in shock. Security cameras in the area captured the last known footage of Haley Anderson. She was seen entering Orlando Tercero's apartment in the early morning hours of March 8th, and from that moment on, no one ever saw her again. When Haley didn't return to her dorm, her roommates began to worry. She was always punctual, quick to respond to messages, and had never missed a class or a work shift. That's why her silence on the morning of March 8th immediately raised alarm. Her friends texted and called repeatedly, but there was no answer. By that evening, when Haley failed to show up for her usual poetry class, their concern turned into panic. They knew something was terribly wrong. As the hours passed, fear grew stronger when every trace of Haley seemed to have vanished completely. Then, when they checked the location-sharing app on her phone, something Haley always kept on so her friends could track her in case of emergencies, they noticed a chilling detail. The last recorded location wasn't her dorm, but Orlando's apartment. In that very moment, they knew it was time to act before it was too late. Fortunately, Haley had always been a cautious person. She understood the importance of personal safety, especially while living away from home. Earlier, she had proactively enabled the Find My Friends feature on her iPhone, allowing her closest friends to know her location at any time. That small detail would become the first crucial clue. When her friends opened the app, they saw that Haley's last recorded location wasn't at her own apartment, but somewhere else. At the apartment of Orlando Tercero, her ex-boyfriend, who had previously shown behavior that often made her uneasy. A heavy silence fell over the group. Their instincts told them something was terribly wrong. Without hesitation, they decided to go to the address themselves to find out what was happening. When they arrived, Orlando's apartment was shrouded in silence. The lights were off. There was no sign of movement, and Haley's car was nowhere to be seen. The sense of unease quickly turned into fear. They knocked on the door and called out her name, but there was no response. Their gut told them something serious was happening inside. And as they tried to peer through the window, the story began to take a turn darker and more terrifying than any of them could have imagined. When Haley's closest friends decided to climb through the window into Orlando's apartment, they had no idea they were about to witness one of the most haunting scenes of their lives. The room was swallowed in darkness, so quiet that the only sound they could hear was the pounding of their own hearts. The air was thick, heavy with the lingering scent of medicine and alcohol, creating an eerie and chilling atmosphere. They called out Haley's name several times, but no one answered. The dim light from a phone flashlight cut through the darkness, and that's when they saw her. On a small bed in the corner of the room, Haley lay motionless, her face peaceful yet shadowed by a trace of fear that hadn't fully faded. Her phone had fallen to the floor, its screen still faintly glowing. There were no obvious signs of struggle, only a stillness that felt both mysterious and heartbreaking. In panic, one of her friends, trembling, pulled out a phone and dialed 911, their voice breaking as they tried to describe what they were seeing. Less than 10 minutes after the emergency call, the flashing blue and red lights of police cars and ambulances illuminated the quiet street of Binghamton, shattering its usual calm. Officers quickly entered the apartment, secured the area, and asked Haley's friends to leave the scene so they could begin the investigation. The atmosphere was heavy, each footstep echoing through the silent room. When the forensic team conducted their examination, they determined that Haley showed no signs of life. The initial findings indicated that she had died due to severe pressure applied to her neck shortly after meeting with Orlando. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion. This was no random incident. Investigators believed the motive stemmed from jealousy, an emotion that had been simmering for a long time and ultimately turned into tragedy.
Police in Binghamton are investigating the death of a college student from Westbury, Long Island, as a homicide. The body of 22-year-old Haley Anderson was found yesterday at a home near the Binghamton University campus. Anderson reportedly was a senior studying nursing. Police are calling a male nursing student linked romantically to Anderson as a person of interest. That student not identified, but police say he left on a flight out of the country before her body was found.
About 7 hours later, at 10:48 a.m., surveillance cameras in the area captured Orlando leaving his apartment alone, his demeanor strangely calm. But that wasn't the end of it. Just a few minutes later, he returned carrying bottles of sleep aids like melatonin and Zquil. It was only later that investigators realized this seemingly harmless action was, in fact, the beginning of a chain of unbelievable events, revealing the disturbed state of mind and the desperate plan of a man spiraling after causing such a tragedy. A few hours after leaving the apartment, Orlando was caught on security cameras heading down to the basement of the building. There, he appeared to be searching for something, Later, police discovered that several eye-shaped metal hooks had been removed from their original positions. When he returned to the apartment, Orlando sat at a table and wrote a short letter in Spanish. His handwriting was shaky, and the message contained only a few lines. "I never imagined I would do this. I'm sorry. Father, I'll see you soon." This note became a key piece of evidence, revealing his disturbed state of mind and panic following the tragedy. Orlando's father had passed away a few years earlier, so investigators believed that in his despair, he was expressing a desire to reunite with his father in the afterlife. This moment marked a psychological turning point, when Orlando completely lost control of his actions and began to think about fleeing from what had just happened. Investigators later believed that after writing the letter, Orlando tried to end everything in his own way. He screwed the metal hooks into a door frame and used his necktie to harm himself. However, whether he slipped or fate intervened, he fell, hitting his head hard on the floor and only injuring himself. The red stain found in the hallway confirmed that the fall had indeed happened, but Orlando survived. After the impact, instead of continuing his desperate act, he changed his plan. With his wound hastily bandaged, Orlando packed his belongings, grabbed his passport, and quietly left the apartment. He took a cab to JFK International Airport in New York, where just a few hours later, he purchased a ticket and boarded a direct flight to Nicaragua, his second home. In doing so, Orlando believed he could escape all legal responsibility, leaving the United States before police could uncover what had taken place inside the Binghamton apartment. At that point, Haley's friends were completely consumed by fear and worry as they were escorted out of the area to give their statements. Inside the apartment, investigators began collecting evidence, from traces in the hallway and disturbed items to the smallest details that could help them reconstruct Haley's final hours. Meanwhile, Orlando had vanished from the city, leaving behind an apartment full of unanswered questions. However, during the sweep of the scene, one deeply troubling detail was discovered, and it left everyone unsettled. During the investigation, police discovered that shortly after the tragedy, Orlando had texted his sister. In the message, he confessed that he had done something terrible and expressed deep shame for disappointing his family. Worried about her brother, Orlando's sister immediately contacted the police, asking them to check on him at his apartment. An officer was dispatched and knocked several times but was met with complete silence. Seeing nothing unusual from the outside, he left, unaware that behind that door lay a horrifying truth waiting to be uncovered. A few hours later, Binghamton police returned to the scene, this time fully informed that there was a woman inside showing no signs of life. But by the time they managed to piece the clues together and confirmed that Orlando was directly connected to Haley Anderson's death, he was already gone, out of the United States and beyond anyone's reach.
We are learning new details today about the man wanted for questioning in the suspicious death of a Binghamton University student. Police identify him as Orlando Tercero. He is also a Binghamton nursing student and the ex-boyfriend of 22-year-old Haley Anderson. Police found Anderson's body on Friday at an off-campus home. They want to question Tercero, but say he fled to Nicaragua before authorities found her body.
And this was where the story became far more complicated than most criminal cases. In the majority of situations, when someone is suspected of being involved in taking another person's life, the trial process takes place within the country where the incident occurred. The judicial system is then responsible for prosecuting, trying, and enforcing the sentence according to national law. However, Things become tangled when a suspect leaves the country, especially if they hold dual citizenship. In most cases, nations can cooperate through an extradition treaty, a legal agreement that allows one country to transfer a suspect to face justice where the crime was committed. But that depends entirely on the diplomatic relationship between the two countries involved. And in this case, between the United States and Nicaragua, Orlando Tercero's homeland, there was no formal extradition treaty in place. This meant that even though U.S. authorities had identified Orlando as the prime suspect, they had no legal authority to compel him to return to the country and face justice. Simply put, he was considered a free man, living beyond the reach of the American justice system. This situation left Haley's family in utter despair. They had to watch the suspect leave the country while justice remained incomplete. Many investigators admitted they felt powerless, and some even publicly expressed pessimism about the chances of bringing Orlando back to the United States. From that point on, every bit of hope depended on the Nicaraguan government, whether they would agree to cooperate and pursue the case or let it fade into silence. As they waited for an answer, Haley's family and the American investigative team lived in a constant state of anxiety, holding on to the fragile hope that justice would one day be served, no matter how long it took. In the United States, while diplomatic officials were still trying to establish contact with Nicaragua, the forensic team continued working tirelessly to determine the exact cause of Haley's death. The autopsy results revealed that she had died from asphyxiation caused by pressure to the neck, and there were clear bruises on her neck and arms, signs that she had desperately tried to fight back. Based on the determined time of death and surveillance footage, experts concluded that the tragedy occurred during the period Haley was with Orlando. While the evidence became increasingly clear, Orlando had already safely arrived in Nicaragua. At Managua International Airport, he was met by his mother, and the two returned to his childhood home. No one knew how much she truly understood about what had just happened in Binghamton. It was only known that she cared for Orlando in the following days, trying to keep everything quiet. However, that calm didn't last long. An international arrest warrant was quickly issued, and just a few days later, on March 13th, when Orlando went to a hospital in the city of Leon to treat his head injury, medical staff recognized him from a police alert. Orlando Tercero was immediately arrested and handed over to Nicaraguan authorities, ending the brief period during which he believed he could escape justice. Back in the United States, the atmosphere at Binghamton University grew heavy with grief. The entire campus was blanketed in silence and sorrow after learning about the passing of Haley Anderson, a nursing student loved by everyone. The university immediately canceled all Monday classes for senior students in her memory. President Harvey Stenger, along with the Dean of Nursing, Mario Arias, issued an official statement expressing their deepest condolences, describing Haley as a dedicated student full of energy who always brought light to others. They extended their sympathy to her family and friends, affirming that her memory would forever remain part of the Binghamton community. Yet amid the flowers and tributes, another emotion was quietly growing: the longing for justice. Haley's family, friends, and classmates wanted only one thing: that the person responsible for this tragedy would be brought before the law. However, when word spread that Orlando had fled to Nicaragua, outrage within the community intensified. All eyes turned toward the Nicaraguan government, the entity now holding the fate of the case. Meanwhile, after his arrest, Orlando was taken to a psychiatric hospital in Managua for a mental health evaluation due to signs of distress and a previous attempt to harm himself. Once deemed stable, he was transferred to the Directorate of Judicial Assistance, better known as El Chipote, a high-security detention facility reserved for serious offenders. After Orlando was detained in Managua, the United States immediately submitted an official request for his extradition to face charges of second-degree intentional homicide, a crime in the state of New York that carries a potential life sentence, with a minimum of 25 years before eligibility for parole. However, the response from the Nicaraguan government left many deeply disappointed. They denied the extradition request, citing the absence of a legal treaty between the two countries. This decision infuriated Haley's family and friends, as it meant Orlando would not be tried on American soil, the place where the tragedy occurred. Nevertheless, the Nicaraguan government later announced that it would prosecute Orlando within its own judicial system. He was charged under the law of femicidio, a legal term in Nicaragua that refers to the killing of a woman due to gender-based motives or jealousy, a crime that does not exist under U.S. law. By definition, femicidio describes a situation in which a man intentionally causes the death of a woman with whom he has a romantic or personal relationship, often driven by possessiveness, jealousy, or the desire for control. With this decision, Orlando would now face trial in his homeland, under the close scrutiny of international media and the hopeful eyes of Haley Anderson's family across the ocean. In this case, prosecutors determined that Orlando Tercero's primary motive was blind jealousy. After becoming close to Haley, he gradually grew obsessed and couldn't accept that she wanted to leave him. The emotions he had bottled up, hurt, disappointment, and a need for control, ultimately manifested in violence. During the trial held in Managua, Haley's mother and several close friends testified, affirming that Orlando had been extremely possessive and had shown excessive controlling behavior toward her. They recounted how he would often show up unannounced, argue with Haley, and had previously vandalized her car the year before. Investigators stated that Orlando likely acted in a jealous rage after realizing Haley no longer had feelings for him. This aligned perfectly with the behavioral pattern police had documented through text messages, surveillance footage, and witness testimonies. The forensic examination conducted in the United States confirmed that Haley's death resulted from asphyxiation caused by pressure to the neck, which occurred inside Orlando's apartment. When combined with surveillance data showing her entering his apartment and never leaving, prosecutors concluded that the evidence was nearly irrefutable. Orlando was solely responsible for the tragedy that took Haley Anderson's life. In court, Orlando Tercero appeared entirely different from what one might expect of a defendant facing such serious charges. Despite being heavily guarded by armed police, he maintained an indifferent demeanor, walking slowly and seemingly unconcerned with everything happening around him.
Developments in the death of a nursing student from Long Island. Police in Nicaragua arrested her ex-boyfriend today. Orlando Tercero could be extradited now back to the U.S. for questioning. Authorities say he left the country before police found Haley Anderson's body in her apartment near the campus of Binghamton University. Investigators have ruled her death a homicide.
Dressed in shabby clothes with a vacant look in his eyes, Orlando sat silently for most of the trial, speaking only when asked to address the court. When it came time for his defense, he presented a shocking argument, claiming that he had lost control and was not in a clear state of mind at the time of the tragedy because he had been drinking heavily that night. He insisted that he couldn't remember what had happened to Haley and believed he had experienced a temporary loss of sanity. However, when prosecutors pressed him on whether such a condition had ever occurred before or after that night, Orlando was unable to provide any medical evidence to support his claim. That argument was quickly dismissed, as every detail, from leaving the scene, writing a confession letter, to boarding a flight overseas, proved that Orlando was fully aware of his actions. In court, no one was convinced. What puzzled many people was that in Nicaragua, several of Orlando Tercero's former classmates still believed he was innocent. To them, Orlando was a calm, polite young man who always smiled and was well liked by his peers. They described him as friendly, kind, and someone they could never imagine being involved in something so serious. Many even insisted that during the time they knew him, Orlando had never shown jealousy or controlling behavior toward anyone. But what they didn't know, or perhaps refused to believe, was that the other side of him had already been laid bare through the evidence collected in the United States. His controlling tendencies, possessiveness, and simmering jealousy in his relationship with Haley had all been confirmed through witness statements, text messages, and surveillance data. Naturally, it was difficult for those who only knew Orlando from afar, through the image of a gentle classmate, to imagine that darker part of his personality. And sadly, even to this day, some of them continue to believe that Orlando was the victim of a misunderstanding, while Haley's family must go on living with an unhealed pain and memories that will never fade. In September 2019, after nearly a year and a half of detention and trial, the case of Haley Anderson officially came to a close at the Managua Criminal Court. After just over an hour and a half of deliberation, the sole presiding judge delivered the verdict in a silent courtroom. She slowly read each word. Orlando Tercero was found guilty of taking the life of a woman out of jealousy. Under Nicaragua's femicidio law, when the sentence was announced, the room fell completely still. Haley's family, watching from the United States via live video, broke down in tears as the judge pronounced the maximum penalty possible: 35 years in prison, the highest sentence allowed under that charge.
A former Binghamton University student has been convicted by a Nicaraguan judge of murdering a fellow nursing student. Orlando Tercero was found guilty today, one day shy of his 24th birthday. He strangled 22-year-old Haley Anderson, a BU student from Long Island, in March 2018 inside his Oak Street Binghamton apartment. He then fled to his native Nicaragua before Anderson's body was discovered. Tercero was arrested by Nicaraguan police, but authorities there refused to extradite him, choosing to try him there instead. According to testimony during the trial, Tercero and Anderson had had a sexual relationship that Anderson ended, and Tercero subsequently stalked her. Witnesses in the trial testified from Binghamton through a video link.
Meanwhile, Orlando sat motionless, his face expressionless. He showed no reaction, no sign of remorse, only staring down at the table as if he had never truly grasped the consequences of what he had done. The trial ended, and justice was finally served, though it could never bring Haley back. The verdict at least offered her family a small measure of peace, yet Orlando did not stop there. A year later, he filed an appeal, arguing that the sentence was too harsh and that the trial process had been flawed. However, in March 2020, the Nicaraguan Court of Appeals rejected his appeal entirely, upholding the 3-decade prison sentence for many. That marked the end of a long and painful journey. But for us authorities, the story was not yet over. The district attorney of Broome County, where the case had originally taken place, issued an international arrest warrant for Orlando and declared that once he completed his prison term in Nicaragua, they would request his extradition so he could face the American justice system. This means that even after Orlando serves 30 years behind bars, if he ever sets foot in the United States again, he could be tried a second time for the same crime, for Haley's family. That remains a small but meaningful hope that justice, no matter how delayed, will ultimately find its way. With the verdict delivered, the long journey for justice for Haley Anderson finally came to an end. Her family, friends, and all who loved her could at last find a measure of peace they so deeply deserved. Even though the pain of loss would never truly fade, Haley is remembered as a beautiful, intelligent, and compassionate young woman who brought joy to everyone around her. She was not only an outstanding student, but also a beloved friend and daughter. Personally, I believe her parents can take pride in the strong and kind-hearted woman their daughter had become. During the 2018 graduation ceremony, her father, Gordon Anderson, walked across the stage to accept Haley's honorary Bachelor of Nursing degree, a moment that brought the entire hall to its feet in emotional applause. That diploma represented more than academic achievement. It symbolized the spirit and unfinished dreams of a young woman who lived with her whole heart. To this day, her friends, professors, and even the patients she cared for during her clinical rotations remember her with deep affection and respect. Haley's legacy doesn't lie in what she left behind, but in the love, kindness, and unwavering belief that no matter how cruel the world can be, justice will always find its voice. And that is the heartbreaking story of Haley Anderson, a young woman full of dreams, kindness, and unwavering faith in the good things in life. This case is not just another tragedy told in the true crime documentary series, but a powerful reminder of the thin line between love and control. It teaches us that when a relationship begins to make you feel afraid, when care turns into jealousy, and when affection becomes pressure, that is no longer love. The lesson from Haley's story is to always trust your instincts, never ignore the warning signs, and never hesitate to seek help when something doesn't feel right. Justice may come late, but the truth will never stay buried. Thank you for staying until the end of today's story in the True Crime documentary series, where we tell real stories with respect for the victims who no longer have a voice. If you believe Haley Anderson deserves to be remembered, please share this video, leave a comment in her memory, and don't forget to subscribe and hit like to support me in continuing to bring you more emotional true stories. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of True Crime Documentary.